The gym smelled of sweat, disinfectant, and ambition. Heavy bags swayed in the corner, the rhythmic slap of fists still echoing. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, casting a pale glow on the tatami mats where Derek Mitchell, the proud black belt instructor, stood at the center like a self-crowned king. "Hey, you there. Cleaning." His voice cracked like a whip across the gym. James Washington stopped mid-swipe, the mop still dripping into the bucket. He looked up slowly, his calm brown eyes meeting the arrogant gaze of the instructor. "How about a quick demonstration?" Derek smirked, straightening his black belt for effect. "Bet you've never seen a real fight in your life, right?" A few nervous laughs came from the 8 students gathered around the edges. Some chuckled out of loyalty to their instructor. Others, more quietly, shifted uncomfortably. James sighed softly. At 42 years old, he had seen enough fights for 10 lifetimes, but none of these people knew that. To them, he was just the janitor, the man who emptied trash cans and mopped sweat off the mats when their training was done. "I don't want to bother you." "Sensei," James replied, his voice low, even, and polite. He leaned down to scrub at a stubborn stain. "Just finishing up here so you can get back to it?" Derek's laugh was sharp, theatrical, designed to wound. "Afraid to even step on the mat, huh? Everyone look at this." The guy's shaking at the thought of sparring. More laughter. Nervous again, but louder this time. James felt something stir deep in his chest. A muscle that hadn't been used in decades. Not anger, not yet, but something older. Something he had buried long ago, because Derek Mitchell didn't know who James really was. He didn't know that 20 years ago, James Silent Storm Washington had been one of the most feared names in the world of mixed martial arts. 5-time world champion, undefeated, a legend, but legends don't mop floors. And James Washington had left that world behind after a single night that still haunted him. "Come on, man," Derek pressed, his grin wide, his arrogance unchecked. "Just a little demo. Show my students how someone like you moves. I bet you don't even know what a guard is." James's eyes flickered. The words, "someone like you," hit harder than any punch. He remembered the jeers from the crowd 22 years ago in Las Vegas. He remembered the voices yelling, "That little black guy won't last 3 rounds." He had lasted. He had won. But it wasn't victory he remembered. It was the aftermath. His best friend, his sparring partner, Tony "Hammer" Rodriguez, lying on the ground after a training session. A freak accident. One punch too hard, one angle too wrong. Tony never woke up. That night had broken James. He retired immediately, disappearing into anonymity. He swore never to fight again. Never to let that rage consume him, and yet, here he was. A mop in his hands. A room full of mocking eyes. And an arrogant black belt poking the very wound he had tried so hard to heal. James stood slowly, placing the mop back in the bucket with deliberate calm. His body unfolded with a grace that caught several students off guard. For a man who was just a janitor, his movements seemed different, fluid, controlled. "All right," James said finally, his voice calm as still water. "But when this is over, you're going to apologize to them." He gestured toward the students. "For turning this mat into a circus." The students exchanged glances. Derek laughed again, but this time there was a crack in it. A thin thread of uncertainty. They squared off in the center of the mat. The students formed a semicircle around them, whispers running like electricity through the air. "Don't worry, everyone," Derek announced loudly, trying to recapture his confidence. "This is just a demonstration. A quick lesson in why respect matters in martial arts." James lowered his gaze briefly, his breathing steady. For a moment, he wasn't in Denver anymore. He was back in that ring in Vegas, 20 years younger, the crowd roaring, his fists trembling with both power and guilt. Sarah Chun, one of Derek's students, watched closely. She was a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, but also a sports psychology student working on a thesis about discrimination in athletics. Something about the janitor's posture unsettled her. The way he breathed, the way he stood, the way he seemed to occupy space like a predator at rest. "Last chance, buddy," Derek sneered. "Either you do this or I call security. Maybe you lose your job too. That was the breaking point. James opened his eyes, and when his gaze locked on Derek, the entire room felt colder. "All right," James said softly. "Let's begin." Derek lunged first. A jab, clean and fast. Textbook form. The kind of strike that would floor an amateur. But James wasn't there. He slipped sideways like smoke, Derek's fist cutting through empty air. "What the—" Derek muttered, spinning. The second attack came faster. Jab, straight, hook. His favorite combination. He had drilled it thousands of times. But James was already gone. A subtle duck, a lean, a half-step back, every punch missed by inches. "Nice technique," James said calmly. "But you telegraph with your shoulder." Too easy to read. The room was silent. No one laughed this time. Sarah watched with wide eyes. She had studied tapes of great fighters for her thesis. What she saw now reminded her of legends. Efficiency, economy of movement. Power wrapped in stillness. Derek grew desperate. He unleashed a flurry. Punches, kicks, wild strikes. Sweat dripped down his forehead. His breath came short, and James hadn't even broken a sweat. Then, in one terrifyingly simple motion, James stepped inside Derek's guard. He placed his palm gently against Derek's chest and pushed. It wasn't even a shove. It was a transfer of weight, energy, and perfect leverage. But the result was devastating. Derek flew. His feet left the mat. He hit the floor 2 meters away with a thud that silenced the room. No one moved. No one spoke. James offered Derek a hand. "Get up," he said softly. Derek staggered to his feet, pale, trembling. That's impossible." "Not impossible," James replied calmly. "Just experience. 22 years of it." Sarah had her phone out, her hand shaking as she scrolled through search results. Her eyes went wide. "Do you even know who he is?" She whispered to Derek. Everyone turned to her as she read aloud, "James Washington, known as Silent Storm, 5-time world mixed martial arts champion. Retired undefeated after the death of his training partner." The words struck like a thunderclap. Gasps filled the room. Students looked at James with new eyes. Derek's mouth opened, but no words came. His arrogance had drained out of him completely. I didn't know," he stammered. "If you had known," James asked quietly, "would you have treated me differently? Or would you still humiliate another janitor? Another worker without credentials to defend themselves?" The question cut deeper than any strike. Derek bowed his head, shame washing over him. The students gathered around James now, not Derek. Their respect had shifted entirely. Sarah spoke up, her voice steady. "Mr. Washington, would you ever consider teaching again? Because I think we could all learn more from you in one night than in a year of classes." James smiled faintly. For the first time in 20 years, he felt the weight lift from his shoulders. "Maybe," he said. "But if I teach, it won't just be fighting. It'll be about respect. Because strength isn't measured in belts or titles or victories. Strength is character, and respect is something every fighter should carry in their heart." The students nodded. Even Derek, and in that moment the janitor was no longer invisible. He was the true sensei. Epilogue. Transformation. 3 months later, the gym was transformed. James Washington, once the silent janitor, now taught advanced classes on technique, discipline, and philosophy. His lessons were not just about punches and kicks, but about life, humility, and dignity. Derek? He still taught, but at a smaller gym, humbled by the humiliation he had once inflicted on others. His arrogance had cost him half his students, but in time, perhaps he would truly change. As for James, he had found peace, not in the roar of the crowd, not in the shine of championship belts, but in the quiet respect of students who saw him not as a janitor, not even as a legend, but as a man who taught them that true strength is not about fighting. It's about respect. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stories like these remind us that greatness isn't always visible. Sometimes it's hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Until next time, Remember, respect everyone, because you never know the storm that lies behind their silence.